Yo, what's checking, everybody? Welcome to a special edition. I say special. Usually we do this a couple of hours earlier on Tuesday. It's the Orangebloods Modcast, minus a couple of people. It's K&A, unofficially.
It's the Orangebloods Podcast with only two of our staff members.
It's like, you guys see us all the time. No, Jason Sukumo in Houston, dropping his kid off to go to Japan. If you've been on Orangebloods, he wrote a tender little piece on his 321 column earlier today, but unavailable today. Stay safe on the highways, Jason. If for some reason, I don't know why he won't just stay in a hotel tonight. You know why? Because the streets are fine in Houston, which is where he's coming from, and dropped his son off. But about halfway there, it could get a little sketchy. Come on, be smart, Jason. We can't tell you what to do, but if you're listening right now while driving, maybe
That's bad.
I know. And Alex is covering the Senior Bowl in Alabama. So it's just Anwar and I as we break down the release of the Texas Longhorn full schedule, the conference schedule announced today. But more than anything, it was a full schedule release by the Big 12 at the top of the hour. Before we dive into that, and before we get to Eric Torres' super chat question and all of the stuff going on, this video brought to you by the Modcast every single week from DeadSoxy. Go to DeadSoxy.com, use the promo code Orangebloods, and get your 25% off. And they are badass socks. And, you know, it's the gift that really could keep on giving, because as you get older, it's funny. It used to be a joke on War that dads would get things like socks and ties on, birthday and Christmas. I find myself, the older I get, liking having nice socks. You know, it's like, as long as you get me good socks, please, by all means, go to DeadSoxy.com and see the very best that socks can be. Jason's always bragging about their grip. All right, Anwar, let's talk about the schedule. You know what? First of all, we'll let Eric Torres have the first shot, because once we get into it, we might not come back around to this. He's basically saying 12-0. Now he's going NCAA playoffs or bust from El Presidente. That's how we kick off Taco Tuesdays with El Presidente. P.S. Rodolfo must be outside making a snowman since he wasn't first.
You know what, Catch?
Look, hey, real quick. Eric, he agrees with you. Cakewalk, 12-0 for Rodolfo. You guys are on the same page.
I'll give El Presidente an award for courage. Can I give him a courage award? Because after this guy has been just massacred for his coaching rankings, not only on Wednesday night, not only on Sunday, he's the first guy in here on Tuesday for the Modcast. I got to give Eric credit. That man there he's a bold man. I got to give him credit.
Thing is, it takes a special kind of person to want to engage in chats, right? Because we got like 300 people already watching the video, and there's not 300 people in the chat. So it takes a special kind of person to be like, I'm going to jump in the chat. Then it takes a special kind of person to say, I'm going to post on Orangebloods. Then it takes an even more special kind of person to be like, to hell with it. I'll go on live with Anwar and put my face out there and let everybody know what's up. So Eric does all of those things, and I'm not worried about him at all. Because if you get to the point where you're like, let me go live with Anwar on his show, you ain't worried about what nobody thinks.
It's swag. It's swag for sure. It's swag for sure.
I have not seen anybody bitching about the schedule yet from any of the schools. So, Twitter tries to beat you with their algorithms so that when you hit refresh, sometimes you get what just happened, and sometimes they're shoving something in your face I have defeated the Twitter algorithm by creating my own 800-person list that keeps Twitter from messing with my stuff. It took me a long time. It took me weeks to build it because Twitter tries to keep you from doing it. I've been refreshing. I don't see Texas fans complaining about the schedule. I don't see other Big 12 people complaining about the school that they either cheer for or cover, that they've somehow been screwed. I'm sure it will get out there. Onward, it took the Big 12 a long time to make this damned announcement, right? But to their credit, it looks a lot cleaner and fair than I think Texas fans thought. And we can start with the Texas side of this, but I would just say from 30,000 feet up, I don't see anybody that I'm looking at where I go, oh, they got screwed. And I'm not looking at anybody where I'm thinking, oh, they've got it easy. So good job, Big 12.
Hey, what would that have looked like if Bowlesby was the commissioner, though? I mean, it would have been the exact opposite.
Anwar, you've been saying it a lot, where like if only the Big 12 had operated over the last decade the way that it has over the last year, maybe we're not in this position, or maybe we are. Like maybe this is what Texas always wanted to be. I'm impressed with the way the new Big 12 under new leadership is being run.
Your Mark, he's good. Like he's good. You can tell when I first met him. I could just tell, he was just different. The way he goes about business seemed to be fair. It was interesting because I talked to a lot of Texas leaders behind the scene, and when there was a lot of hostility as relates to Bowlesby, and when the new guy came in, all that left. Like there was no more hostility towards the Big 12, and they kind of pumped the brakes on it, and like everyone felt a lot better about it. I think he's doing a good job. He's been able to not only save the conference, get them more money. They're going to stay relevant after Texas is gone. Didn't screw Texas on what was likely going to be on the way out. I look at the schedule, and we'll get into it. I think if you're a Texas fan, you have nothing to complain about at all. You have a lot to be excited about. I think the Big 12, I will stand by it as Texas goes out. It's going to be that thing. Man, if you had him from the beginning, may not be in the situation. May not have been able to avoid it, but damn, you would have avoided a lot of years of hostility.
All right, let's do it. Let's go through the Texas schedule, and then from there, the conversation can break into any direction that we want to. I definitely already have some thoughts on what's going to play out, and I thought Travis Gailey, our cohort at Orangebloods, who I tried to get on today's Modcast, but he's doing like ice stuff. So the Texas schedule, it's 6 weeks on, and then a bye week, and then 6 weeks out to close the season. So as we get started talking about the order of the games and everything else, there's no September bye. There's no November bye. You get your bye week right after Oklahoma, and that's it. And every team in the conference has one bye week. Nobody, again, when you look at the schedules, nothing looks like someone's getting an advantage over anybody else. Texas opens the season September 2nd against Rice. If you're looking at this full screen that the Big 12 created, and this is what they tweeted at the top of the hour, home games are in gray, road games are in white. So the opening 3 weeks of the season, not rocket science. Rice at home, Alabama away, Wyoming at home. That's most of your September. Well, I guess it's 3/5 of September. Then Big 12 play starts the week after Wyoming, September 23rd. They're in Waco, the final game in Waco before Texas moves to the SEC. You knew that game was going to be played. Then Texas gets Kansas at home the week after that, and then they get Oklahoma. So Anwar, for just a moment, what are your thoughts when I say at Baylor, home against Kansas, Oklahoma to start the Big 12 season?
I say you should be happy if you're a Texas fan. You should look at that and say to yourself, you almost should say championship. And here's why. Those three teams that you mentioned, Catch, not a single one of them finished with a winning record last season. Baylor, 6-7. Kansas, 6-7. OU, 6-7. You look at the first, not only that, you go to your non-conference games, 2 of the 3 you should definitely win, right? And then you got the Alabama game, which last year was a coin toss, right? And then you go into your Big 12 schedule. Again, all those teams had losing records last season. I look at that and I'm saying to myself, okay, all right, go ahead and put those teams out there. You're not putting any quote unquote killers in front of you. You're not starting off with the Kansas States of the world, Texas Techs, or something to that effect. Me go, oh man, like I've been wanting this runway for Texas when it comes from a scheduling standpoint. I'm not saying this is an easy schedule by any stretch of the imagination, but if you're telling me your 3 first conference games are against teams that had losing records before you go into a bye, yes, sir, take that. You should definitely want to take that.
Yeah, I think that I wrote about this over the weekend and nobody cared. It was just one of these weird weekends where, like, it didn't matter what I wrote. Nobody wanted to read it. You look at the Big 12, it's hard to find a single team in the Big 12 that before today's schedule announcement is made, it's hard to just look at the league and think, this is a team, circle that date. Oklahoma, because it's Oklahoma. Beyond that, it's hard to make sense of who any of these teams are. The last 2 Big 12 champions have come out of nowhere. Baylor was in the second half of the conference predictions. Same with Kansas State. So, there's a part of, like, I don't know what exactly to think. My first reaction when looking at the 3 teams that Texas gets to open conference play, I think Baylor will be better, I think, because I believe in their head coach. I don't know what that means to be better. They were not good this year, and they didn't have good quarterback play. Something tells me they have a little bit of a bounce back. So, tricky game in Waco, home game against Jalen Daniels. And I think the placement of Kansas before Oklahoma does Texas a favor, because Texas presumably will play Dylan Gabriel this season in the Red River Shootout. Jalen Daniels is the most fearsome quarterback guy that you will prepare for, I think, in the Big 12 this season. To get him the week before Oklahoma, I think better prepares you for that game. So, if you're going to have to go and play Jalen Daniels at home, if that's a game you're going to have, it's not a bad place in the schedule to have that game. And then you've got Oklahoma. So it's on the road, at home, neutral site game, nothing tricky about the first 3. You get a little bit of everything. And like you said, there's nothing in those first 3 games that should scare Texas. Frankly, I wouldn't go so far as to say you are probably thinking that should be a 5-1 start.
Oh, that's 100%. I'm saying that's 5-1. I mean, I'm going to, give you Bama as a loss on the road. That's fine. I'm going to give you Bama as that. Listen, as we get closer, we know that Texas fans are going to shout us down on that one, right? So we know what's coming catch in August and September, right? You know what Alabama is lost. You know what Alabama's replacing.
But you know what? They're replacing the quarterback, and maybe Texas is, at least it's on paper, vulnerable Alabama, as opposed to what they looked like a year ago when you were returning the Heisman Trophy winner. And a lot of people were saying this is Saban's most talented team. We know now that that wasn't the case. And as far as average Alabama teams go, that's what came to Austin last year. We didn't know it at the time. But when you look at them, I could see 6-0. I mean, I'm not telling you I'm picking Texas to beat Alabama in week 2. I'm just telling you I don't know what Alabama is either. So considering that game was so close last year, I'm not automatically thinking that's a definite loss, because I don't know. I don't know who plays quarterback for Alabama, and I don't know really who plays quarterback for Texas. So those 2 things make both of those 2 teams kind of, I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I'm with you. This should be a 5-1 start at a minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it does get tricky in the second half of the season, even if I don't think any of the games by themselves are incredibly imposing. But let's just go through it. And Anwar, this is going to be one of these. This first game after the bye week for Texas.
Mm-hmm.
This can be one of these. This is like the Arkansas game from a couple of years ago. Now, Houston is in Arkansas in that they had once this big rivalry with Texas. But there's a pettiness involved in the Houston-Texas relationship. You knew Texas was going to play at Houston. I mean, it's one of the only things that I was 1,000% certain we were going to see was Texas going on the road at Houston. I promise you, Houston begging for that game. Mm-hmm. So that's a game Texas should win, but I bet Houston ends up being pretty good. And by pretty good, Houston's probably like a 7-5 team.
Okay.
But they'll get up for that game. That'll be a big one. That is one. I'm telling you, you and I just said Texas should go 5-1 to start the season. That Houston game coming out of the bye week could be tricky. Especially if they play that.
I'm going to believe you this time, Catch. I'm going to believe you this time.
and look, I thought, I really respected Arkansas. I'm just telling you, of all the games that Texas will play this season on the road, the Houston game will be the one where the locals make the biggest deal out of it.
Okay.
Consequently, Texas will probably have a bunch of fans in the stands too, because they'll be able to get their hands on tickets. But that's a petty little in-state rivalry. It's like playing in Waco twice. Then you get a couple of home games. BYU and Kansas State. Hey, those feel like the exact same type of games. There are two teams on the schedule really that you think to yourselves might be a bloodbath, probably going to have to win a hardcore fist fight. They're both at home back-to-back. So I think one prepares you for the other. I also think BYU could take a little sting out of Texas, even if I pick Texas to win that game and they do. That would be a game they come out with some bumps and bruises in because of how BYU plays. Mm-hmm. But again, those are winnable games. Those are winnable games.
Yeah, I mean, you had more. I mean, yes, Catch. There's a couple of things because so we're just talking about the first 6. Is that where we're at right at this point?
We're through the first 9. I just finished talking about the first 3 after the bye, where you've got Houston on the road and then BYU and Kansas State. So if you're 6-0 or 5-1 going into those 3 games, what do you think they need to be coming out?
I mean, listen, Catch, at that point, I mean, if you're at that 6-1 point, or so, yeah, I mean, at that point, you've got the 2, tough road games later, right? So you've got your at TCU, you're going to be at Iowa State. Iowa State's not that good of a team. TCU, we'll see how they rebuild. But I mean, Catch, at that point, and again, we got to see what K-State has. And that's the other thing, Catch. Like, we look at a lot of these teams, we know they're going to be losing so much.
Yeah.
We know what Texas is bringing back. So, I mean, Catch, if you get to that point, and especially if you're undefeated in Big 12 play and you've gotten past OU, which is always, somewhere. I can't imagine OU is going to have just another bad season the way that they did. K-State, I think, will be competitive, but they come down to earth. I think TCU comes down to earth. I think at that point, Catch, you're telling yourself you're in the CFP conversation, and you're telling yourself just finish out, and not only the Big 12 championship game, but you're in a CFP conversation.
I'm not quite there.
If you get to 5, if you say 6-1,
we're saying 5-1 after 6 weeks, and then they play 3 games on the road at Houston. I'll tell you where I'll go with it, and I'm not far away from where you are. But the key is the Oklahoma game, as it probably should be. If you win that game, you can make a case that Texas goes in to the final 3 weeks of the season with either probably 0 losses in the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't want to give too much benefit of the doubt. Texas hasn't earned it, but I think they're sitting with one Big 12 loss somewhere along the way going into the final 3 weeks of the season. And then I think they've got road games in Fort Worth and another game in Ames, those back to back. And then you end it with Texas Tech after Thanksgiving. Although maybe that game's on a Saturday and not, I'm not sure what the Big 12 has them all listed at 11:25. That may not be the case. I feel like the season comes down to TCU and Iowa State. 2 of your last 3 games are on the road. If Texas does what you and I think they should do in the opening half of the season, you're probably putting yourself in a position where you've only got to win one of those 2 games to get into the Big 12 championship game. If you've dropped one somewhere along the way, then it may mean you have to win both. And that's a tricky little duo. I mean, historically, Texas hasn't played well in Fort Worth in the last decade or so, although they did win the last time they were there. And then Iowa State's always a weird game. I mean, games in Ames have been also difficult for Texas to win. So for me, upon first glance, when I look at this schedule, the thing I notice the most is that TCU Iowa State back-to-back on the road in November stretch, where if they're as good as you say they could be, right? They start accumulating wins and suddenly you're playing with maybe one loss and you are somewhere in the playoff conversation. Because then presumably your loss would be either to Alabama, or if you beat Alabama and you just lose somewhere else on the road, you've got that huge Alabama win to prop you back up. Then again, TCU and Iowa State represent I'm just telling you right now, those 2 games will define this season.
Catch. Here's where I'm going to disagree. TCU will never. I don't know in my lifetime if TCU will ever have a season like they just had again. Like they will be humbled and they will come back down to life. Max Duggan is done. Their Keandre is done as well. Quentin is done. Like, you're talking about their 3 studs on offense with a defense that for the most part was pretty below average all year long. A program that had every single bounce happen their way. I'm not negating what happened, but they were very fortunate. You can't replicate that. And I don't think TCU, as much as I respect what they were able to accomplish last season, that shit ain't happening again. And
they don't have to be the number 2 team in the country to make it very difficult for Texas. And again, I'm not saying Texas loses to TCU or Iowa State. What I'm telling you is everything will be on the line in those 2 road games. Either we're talking about something as high as you're talking about, or we're talking about the floor of this season, which should be making the Big 12 championship game.
Well, they should, because this looks like 10-2 to me, Catch, with maybe 1 conference loss and an Alabama loss.
You see, where you're operating, and I'm not saying that you're wrong. You're giving Texas benefit. You're giving 13-12 Steve Sarkisian a lot of benefit of the doubt to be like, I'm looking at the schedule and it looks like 10-2 and Alabama and 1 Big 12 game somewhere along the line. While they did win their final 2 Big 12 games on the road, it's still a Texas outfit that has to prove that they can go an entire season on the road outside of Alabama and win all their games. I don't think they're going to do it. They're losing somewhere on the road because they always lose somewhere on the road. And I say that as somebody that picked the Texas Tech game last year, months before that game was played. And I was like, I know that looks like a W. That'll end up being a really tricky game. It's when I picked 8-4, Tech was one of those games that I circled. When I look at the Big 12 road games, Baylor, Houston, TCU, Iowa State, you're damn right they're losing at least one of those games.
The thing about the schedule that I think you can't negate when you look at it, and Blake, can you put the schedule back on the screen for me real quick? If you get, all right. Here's the thing that can't be negated about the schedule, Catch. Texas leaves the state of Texas 2 times this year. At Alabama to start off the year, at Iowa State at the end of the year. Catch, every single game Texas plays is within the state of Texas. Every single game, whether it's the Rice game, the third game that's there, BYU's in Waco, Kansas is at home. Obviously, Dallas for OU. Houston is in the state. BYU is here. K-State is here. TCU is just Fort Worth, Iowa State, and then Texas Tech at home. You can take it off for me, Blake. Thank you. I mean, it's favorable. It's favorable that you don't really have to go, to what we thought would be worst case scenario, Cincinnati in November.
We still don't know how good this quarterback position is going to be for Texas. We don't. We don't. And I think you more than anybody has to be careful with how much benefit of the doubt you'd give Quinn Ewers going into the start of the season. I think he's going to be better, but do I know that dude's going to play well on the road and no, I definitely am nowhere close to knowing that.
But look, the jury will be technically out, but he's still got here's the thing, Catch.
What?
I hear what you're saying.
He's a 132 quarterback. I mean,
I understand. I understand that things change every year.
Remember, he wasn't going to play a bad quarter the rest of the season.
I understand. And no one thought Max Duggan was going to be who he was last year either. Sometimes things change and people improve. What I'm saying, Catch, is this thing is on a tee, and maybe on this we would agree. This is on a tee for Texas.
It is.
The schedule is good for Texas. They don't have to leave the state only 2 times. You'd have to find out how often that's ever happened. They don't have to leave it 2 times, and one of them is a non-conference game, so it
reminds me of TCU's schedule from a year ago. I think they had something very similar.
And so you've got that. You've went in the transfer portal. You've got A.D. Mitchell. You've got Xavier Worthy. You've got Jatavian Sanders, right? You've got the elite running backs. You've got an elite offensive line. You've got defensive linemen that's supposed to be maturing and getting better. You've got Jalen Ford that's coming back. You've got most of your secondary intact. Catch. I mean, if this is not the year to dream big, that fold up shop. Well, let's do another website.
Hey, look, I'm with you. Look, this needs to be the year. I do think it's on a tee. Nothing about this schedule. The most imposing thing about this schedule is that they play at TCU and at Iowa State.
Which is not that imposing.
That's what I'm saying.
Should it be?
I'm with you.
Today. On January 31st, as we record this, so people may go back in time, right? Because someone will pull it up, and in freaking Kansas will be 11-0 or something like that. It shouldn't be on paper that we should look. We shouldn't be. And damn it, we shouldn't be at a point where we're looking at Iowa State like, oh man.
Well, hey man, it's not my fault that every time Texas goes to Ames, sometimes they walk out with bloody noses.
They start playing those sirens out there. That place is wild, man. That place is wild.
Here's what I'm saying, Anwar, and I think the answer to this gets us to a really critical point where I think you and I meet in the middle, okay?
Trey said I'm in full drunk uncle model.
When we see at Baylor, at Houston, at TCU, and at Iowa State. If we forget about this upcoming Texas team and we look at every Texas team that you and I have covered for the last 8 years, Texas will drop one of those 4 in the previous reincarnations of every team that we've seen, correct?
Typically. Oh, yes. Typically, yes.
I mean, it's happened every year. I mean, it happened in Lubbock this year, and there's circumstantial things for why it might have happened, but it happened. Ultimately, what we're saying is there is a culture jump for Texas. Mm-hmm. That it's on a tee. It's there to be taken. I wrote about it this weekend. The damn door is open. They do have to walk through it, though, and it means Sarkisian has to flip the switch with this team where they don't, at some point this season, drop one of these games that you and I are kind of making fun of right now and saying, or I'm saying they're kind of dangerous, and you're like, to hell with that. It shouldn't be dangerous. Baylor shouldn't be dangerous. They weren't very good this year. TCU loses everybody. U of H is U of H. I'm with you. I'm just saying we've yet to see a Texas team handle its business in a way that we're talking about them handling their business. So in year 3 under Sarkisian, what you're forecasting is the grown-up adult behavior week in and week out that this program has lacked ever since you and I have been working together.
I mean, yeah. And you know what? I acknowledge what you're saying. So just so we're clear, I've learned this through a lot of relationship counseling, right? I acknowledge you and acknowledge that I see some of your points that you have here. And I want to say that I appreciate the way that you communicated that.
Making me feel warm over here. Thank you.
I want to tell you that. And then I want to say too, and I know this is Modcast, and I know this is not Overreaction Monday, and I know this is not where we usually go here, but golly, freaking catch. If you can't with all, I'm talking about on the way out, the Big 12 is not screwing you over. On the way out, 10 of your 12 games are going to be within the state of Texas. The toughest game that you technically have on your schedule is going to be Alabama. They removed Mike Gundy from your schedule. Do you talk about the thorn in the Texas side? They do not play Mike Gundy this year.
It's an advantage for Texas versus Oklahoma. Oklahoma has to go at Oklahoma State this season.
Yeah,
so that's an edge for Texas.
So you remove the guy that pretty much owns you, right? Like, just because we know that Gundy is pretty much has owned Texas for as long as I've been here.
It's okay to swallow your pride, Texas fans, and acknowledge it might be okay to not see Mike Gundy ever again.
It's okay. It's quite all right. I'm quite all right with that. And I look at a catch, and my thing is, if not now, then when? Because that's where I'm going to go. Because if we are getting to the end of the year and we're talking about, Quinn Ewers, it wasn't able to have the great season, and it really wasn't a good running back. And, they're still waiting for some of these young guys to develop. And, man, they just need another recruiting class and bring in some more guys. And let's see what happens in the portal. At that point, I'm literally going to throw my hands up and say it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. In my mind, it has to be this year. In my mind, that's what you're saying. We're saying two different things. You're acknowledging what I'm saying. You're just saying that we would have to ignore the past, which says we've said this before and they've never come close. But my goodness, Catch, it's got to be the year.
It does. It puts a lot of pressure on Steve Sarkisian. I will put more pressure on him today than he'll ever feel, because I don't think he's under pressure, really. But the platform is there. The advantages are there. I'm looking at Oklahoma's schedule. It seems like it might be a little tougher than Texas. And I think Oklahoma, look, Texas may play Oklahoma twice this year. Like, I think we might on the year out, because I think Oklahoma's going to be better this year. I mean, if nothing else, Venables looked at his roster and said, this group sucks. And he went heavy in the portal.
Yeah.
He had a dope recruiting class with pieces just like Texas. There's pieces up and down their entire recruiting class that you go, okay, that guy helps them.
Mm-hmm.
But they're on the road at Cincinnati. I mean, if you had to dodge a road game against any of the teams coming into the league,
yeah,
I think you'd not want to go to Cincinnati.
No, you don't want that.
They've been the best of these teams lately. That so they're at Cincinnati. Texas is obviously a neutral game. Then they have a 4-week stretch in October and November where they're at Jalen Daniels in Kansas. They're in Stillwater against Gundy and the Big 12 Bedlam goodbye. Then they get a break with West Virginia at home, but then they're in November on the road in Provo to play BYU. That is a more difficult stretch than what Texas has to play down the stretch. And, oh, by the way, Oklahoma's got to do all of those things that I think Texas has. You know what I mean? Like, they lost enough games this year that it's not Bob Stoops, it's not Lincoln Riley anymore. That team under Brent Venables has to prove that they can handle something like that. And I guarantee you, Oklahoma fans are looking at the Oklahoma schedule today, and they're thinking, it just like Texas, it looks really good early on. That last 6 games, you can't completely know what you're going to get. It's a total box of chocolates. It feels like Oklahoma and Texas, the Big 12, could come down to this year. Which of these two teams matures the most as an actual not a team about potential, but a team week in and week out that wins their games?
I mean, here's the thing, Catch. You did it. I know you said last one. I mean, when in the conversation, you didn't mention UCF before you started talking about the other incumbents. And UCF is a kind of a tricky school. You know that they finished with 9 wins last season, Catch. So they're like in that don't sleep on them range. Like Cincinnati, we know is a tough team, but like UCF, even though it's at home, OU hasn't been a dominant team at home. And
the thing about Central Florida, Anwar, they get, so you played 9 games, conference games. Mm-hmm. Unless you're Texas and Oklahoma, and one of those is a neutral game, so you have 4 and 4. Central Florida got the wrong end of the 4 and 5 or 5 and 4 stick. Their road games are Manhattan, Lawrence, Cincinnati, Texas Tech, and OU. I feel like they're going to learn a couple lessons in the Big 12 in year 1 at Kansas State early in the season. It just sounds like problematic. That feels like, okay, they'll find out what a lot of Big 12 teams have learned over the years. That going to Manhattan and Manhattan from Orlando, Florida, that is a trip. They will feel like they've entered another planet. Imagine going from the Central Florida campus.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful campus, by the way.
Get on a plane. You go to Manhattan, Kansas, and you open up the doors, and then you realize, like, oh,
yeah,
we are not. Actually, we are in Kansas, Toto.
Even when you look at like UCF, to your point, right? When I'm like looking through some of the schedule last year, they were at Florida Atlantic, so that's home. At East Carolina might be the worst place that they've played. I mean, at Memphis, like for the most part, they flew into major airports. Yeah. For the most part, they didn't have to take a puddle jumper or take a small little thing to get to where they need to go to. They will definitely leave that nice Florida campus, which is a beautiful campus down there. And they've got a road game versus Cincinnati in November. Like they can't love that.
You know who got taken care of?
Who's that?
Cincinnati. Cincinnati's on the right side of that 5 home game, 4 away game potential flip-flop. And their road schedule is at BYU, which is kind of team they've been playing lately. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
They've done stuff like that before. They're at Oklahoma State. Hey, who the hell knows? Gundy's earned some benefit of the doubt that he'll bounce back, even if it looks like his program is crumbling at the seams. And then they got Houston again. Cincinnati gets 4 Big 12 road games. 2 of the 4 are against teams that are new to the Big 12.
Yeah.
And then they get West Virginia. So
that's pretty nice.
They don't have to go at Oklahoma, and they don't have to they don't have to play Texas. So, upon first glance, and the way I'm looking at it, they don't play TCU either. So Oklahoma at home, and they don't have to play Texas or TCU on the schedule. That Cincinnati got hooked up. Because if that was Texas's schedule, I'd be like, book it. Book it. Go get ready for that first semifinal, because that's that's more than a doable schedule. That's almost fairy tale scheduling. And that is not what Texas or Oklahoma, either one of those, quite received.
I mean, it helps that Cincinnati is a pretty good team too. So
I know they'll come in, they'll be good.
Yeah. No, that helps, out a lot. So that's the only one that kind of stuck out. So I was looking at some of the other ones. Houston didn't look like anything that stood out to me. I mean, they interesting that they go to UTSA, which UTSA is not a bad program, right? So but they've got UTSA, Rice, TCU, then Sam Houston State. So they get kind of a gift for an early start, just throwing your TCU there, and then go from there. And then Tech, the bye, and then like you said, their latter half of their schedule is a little bit tougher, with some tough games there. I think the Texas game stands out, the K-State, and then of course Cincinnati. But
Cincinnati's a real dark horse to make it to the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah,
that schedule is. If Oklahoma State's average, Cincinnati might make the Big 12 championship game with that schedule. Whether they beat Oklahoma or not, it just shapes up really nicely for them. That's just not a formidable schedule.
Mm-hmm.
They avoid the number 2 team in the country from last year. They avoid Texas. They get Oklahoma early in the season at home. After you're done with Oklahoma, it's BYU, Iowa State, Baylor, Oklahoma State, Central Florida, U of H, West Virginia, Kansas. Like, that's kind of the type of schedule they've been playing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. I mean, I really don't know anything about Cincinnati's team. I don't know what they've got coming back. But they look like something. Let's go into our super chats. By the way, you and I have done that thing where it's 2:00 and we're still going. We'll go to the super chats and knock these out.
Check it out. Just checking to make sure my son is okay. I threw a bunch of candy and Doritos in there, so
we're doing a scheduled. Of course, the very first question is Mike Farrell says we're getting Deuce. How much is he smoking? My sources have not told me that. I'll be honest. I haven't checked on with my sources on Deuce for a few days. There is a report. I apologize. I'm not quite even sure who reported this earlier today that Deuce, DR, for those of you who somehow think you're hearing an H sound when I say his name. If I were him, I wouldn't sign. There's no reason to. All these schools will save a scholarship for you. Quite frankly, when these guys like Robinson sign letters of intent, it locks them in. What not signing does is it means he can do anything he wants to, whenever he wants to, at whatever time that he wants to, and that includes after the Major League Draft. So, it wouldn't completely surprise me. I don't know that Texas is getting him. I'll tell you what, though, I will check in with some sources today. I was already going to do it. Be on the lookout on Orangebloods for that before the day is over. Eric back in the super chat says, if the new AD was in place years back, would Texas and OU be exiting? I think he's talking about the Big
Your
12.
Mark. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your Mark is his name. That's what I think. That's what I think he means, the Big 12 commissioner.
That's
I don't
what he
think
meant.
means
Yeah.
Connie. Yeah. Is it Brent Your Mark?
We can
you know
just
how I
answer
feel.
it
I mean, I
both
kind of.
ways, right?
You said what?
So ultimately, we can answer it both ways.
Yeah. Well, for sure. Brett Yormark, I feel like, is because just look at what the Big 12 has looked like since he's taken over. We had the Ketch and I, had the conversation years ago where we felt like the Big 12 should expand. And that's when they were talking to the UCFs of the world, Cincinnati's of the world, USFs of the world. And we felt like this is the thing to do to move this conference forward. And everybody in the Big 12 said, you know what, we just kind of like our money and we're just going to kind of keep it. And kind of like in Texas at some point, it's like, okay, is anybody going to do anything to make this conference any kind of better, any little bit kinds of better? No. And so as a result of that, it became stale. It became stagnant. Texas, I know you got tired of carrying the conference, and just move on. He comes in, he adds in 4 teams. They were starting to work on that anyway. But there've been the addition of the new teams that are there. You feel like the leadership is a lot better and a lot different. The only big complaint we have about the Big 12 is that the refs suck. And right now, that's the only thing we can complain about, is that the refs suck. Outside of that, the conference, to me, is not the crappy conference that it was when Bowlesby was running it.
It's a hard question to answer, Eric, because at the end of the day, Texas was ready to be in the cool kids club. And I think there's a conversation to be had that if 5 years ago this guy was already in place and you knew in advance that the playoff was expanding to 12 teams, that you knew, not it might happen, not we think it might have the votes, but you knew. Maybe Texas decides all that matters is that we're in the playoff every year and recruiting will follow from there. What's the easiest way to get to the playoff? Is it going into the SEC or is it playing in the Big 12, expanded to 12? I think there is a conversation to be had in this brave new world of college football about whether or not, if all this had happened 5 years ago, what kind of conversations taking place. Tom G says, this is a very manageable schedule. Love getting Baylor early and no Cincinnati. If Texas is who we think they need to be, other than Alabama, no team other than maybe OU should scare us.
I'm with Tom D. I looked at the schedule. I look at the team. Whatever you want to say I am at this point, I look and I'd say I'm giving them, and maybe it's a benefit of the doubt, but I'm giving them like at 10-2. Like that's Bama's the only program that I've seen to myself that Texas should be said to themselves, all right, that's probably a loss. And even last year, I said that, and it was almost a win. I ended up being a loss and I'm being correct. Now, look, there's other programs on there. And I know. Quinn, let's see what happens with him. There's going to be some question marks at running back. Like, I get all that. This team is too stacked, too much talent for me to just all of a sudden shortchange. I'm not going to poor mouth it right now. I'm gonna go 10 toes down on it. I agree with you, Tom G.
I agree with Tom G that there are no teams that should scare Texas. That the choice of words that he brings to that statement, I don't disagree with either. The team that should scare, who should scare Texas fans? Texas. Texas should scare Texas fans, not any of the teams on the schedule. It's this team being mature and growing up and not losing games they shouldn't lose and being susceptible to playing bad teams on the road and making those teams look really good. It's about answering your quarterback question. It's about answering your running back questions. It's about answering the defensive personnel questions that now suddenly exist where you don't know who's starting at linebacker necessarily. You think it's going to be Anthony Hill. Nobody made mention of this, and I wrote about it. My 10 thoughts from the weekend. Anwar, did you know before I wrote about it this weekend that only one freshman linebacker in the last 35 years has started his first game as a true freshman at Texas?
No. Who was it?
Malik.
That's what I thought. I was like, I thought I was going to be prisoner of the moment. That's why I was going to go with Malik.
Malik is the only linebacker in the last 35 years that has started the opening game as a true freshman. That's not to say that Anthony Hill can't do it, or that he won't do it, or that he won't be good at doing it. It's acknowledging, hey, that's not usual at Texas. The only team that Texas has to fear is its own team, because if they answer their own questions, they get better quarterback play, they get better coaching, they should win these games. Gun to my head, 9-3.
Okay.
It's losing to Alabama. It's beating Oklahoma. It's losing one of those two games at TCU and Iowa State. And then some weird hiccup that Texas always has. And until they don't stop having them, it's hard for me to say that they will. But 9-3 could get them in the Big 12 championship game. And 9-3 is really close to 10-2. I mean, we're not far. We're kind of messaging it in different ways, but neither one of us is talking about 8-4. So, we both believe that this thing gets better and takes a step forward. Again, go do it, Steve. Because if Anwar and I are saying 9-3 and 10-2 in January, do you know what this is going to sound like in July?
12-0.
Yes.
And people will think my 10-2 is too conservative.
Oh, be like, why are you always such a crybaby worrywart, Anwar?
So negative with your 10-2 predictions.
So all I'm saying is, if we're saying this on January 31st, 10-2 will be the floor. In a lot of estimations, it'll be interesting to see what goes on there. Eric says Jalen Milroe was average at best. He makes no comment about Texas's own quarterback play. If Texas can't beat Bama with a new quarterback, new OC and DC, we've got problems year 3 of Sark. And that's one way to look at it, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, especially with you. If you go with the opposite with Texas, which you have your same defensive coordinator since for year 3. In fact, 8 of the 10 guys have been here from day one. So, I don't think we have not seen that in my tenure. I can tell you that much, because I know Charlie had a revolving door of coaches, and we know Tom Herman after year 3 blew it up, and he got rid of 7 of his guys there. So you're talking about a coaching staff that has been together for this will be their 3rd season together, with the only exceptions will be the wide receiver coach and then the running backs coach, because Stan Drayton took the job over at Temple. You would have coaching continuity. It's all there, man. Like, oh my God.
By the way,
don't let this thing go off the rails.
You know how Adam?
I will not be in a good mood in December if this shit goes off the rails.
You know how Adam Lowy sponsors everything Texas related? Like, he's on the scoreboard at the Irwins at the Moody Center. There should some revolving door store should have been wise and done a sponsorship with Texas. Because it would be so on brand. Because you're right. How many stories have you written over the last decade where the theme of the story is this is the 3rd blank coach that this player has had since he signed 4 years ago? It's been like all of them.
Every year. There's not a single. I could go through the list.
I know.
All of them, the different. How many coordinators did Sam Ehlinger have, like, during his tenure? Casey Thompson, how many has he had, right? Quinn Ewers is Quinn Ewers, I got to go back and look. Quinn Ewers might have the longest tenure with an OC of any quarterback we've had over the past like 4 of them.
Well, Deshaun Watson did come back for that second year.
Yeah, that's
all right. So we'll change topics here. This is funny. Leith brings up Texas playing at Cougar High Field. That's the Big 12. Giving the middle finger to Texas. He's right. I'm telling you, it's the only game I was certain that would be played. Because none of these other schools, the newcomers, would cut off like a pinky finger to play Texas. Like Cincinnati's probably like, sure, we'll go year one with no Texas on the schedule. No problem. Same with Central Florida. That game being played at Houston, if Texas gets screwed out of a game by the officials this year, it's either going to happen in Waco or in Houston. No questions asked. That's some old Southwest Conference weird stuff happening. The stuff that normally happens in Oklahoma State games could happen in that Cougar High game. No doubt about that.
I mean, it's a stadium steed. I'm looking at the pictures right now. They say that they look at a record attendance of 42,000. Is this correct? Is this true?
The last time they played Texas early in the 2000s, they put up temporary bleachers and stuff was coming apart at the seams, and people they thought it was dangerous to sit in the stands. Like they're junkie university.
Wait a second. So they're not going to go to like NRG? They're really going to do this thing at
if I'm U of H, I want that thing on campus.
Sure. Now, because if you go to NRG, then you run the risk of having more Texas fans overtake you.
Well, it's not a home game; it's almost a neutral game because of what you bring up, which is Texas fans will fill that thing. I don't know. I mean, look, the schedule just came out. I haven't seen any definite clarity there because we've been doing this show. I'm assuming that game's on campus. I would not. If I'm Houston, you're only getting Texas once. And if you're the rest of the Big 12, you're giving Texas 2 neutral site games.
Yeah.
That's one less road game that they've got to play.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Then suddenly they're only playing 3 conference road games. So, because the way they have it set up, it's 4, 4, and 1. I don't know. I just can't imagine. James says, is it not a big deal that we don't play Kansas State? Hey, brother. James, we already talked about that. It is not a bad thing. Oklahoma not only has to play them, they've got to go to Stillwater, and Texas just doesn't have to deal with Oklahoma State.
Oh, by the way, Eric says I'm going to the hood and take your gun. So what's the school that's right next to them? The HBCU that's next to Houston. What's that one called? Is it Texas Southern? What's the name of that school?
It's not Texas Southern. Texas. Maybe I don't even know.
There's a HBCU that's right next door to Houston. So anyway, you remember back in the day, Texas Southern. Does that sound right? Catch. I think it's Texas Southern.
To be honest, don't know where Texas Southern is.
So check this out. This is a funny story. So you remember back in the day that they were doing satellite camps? You remember that was like a huge deal. Like, oh my gosh, they're going to satellite camps. You remember how that was going to be the thing that reshaped, right? So I remember, I was following around. I think it was Herman, and he was doing a satellite camp at Texas Southern. It's going to be at 8 a.m. that morning. So I forget where they was. I feel like it was like at SMU one day, and it was supposed to be Texas Southern the next day. So I get a hotel room, and I have put in my ways on how to get to Texas Southern for the satellite camp. So I'm driving, but it's taking me all these back ways, right? And I'm looking at this place. I'm like, this place looks like Beirut. I don't know where the hell I'm driving at. There is then this hooker that's in the middle of the road, right? And she's walking slow. It's like almost 8 o'clock in the morning, okay?
I love that we've hit the 1 hour mark and we're talking about the hooker in Houston. Proceed.
Yes, continue, right? So she's walking, and I'm behind her, but she's still walking in the middle of the street. There's nothing. I mean, I'm talking. There's broken glass everywhere, smashed cars, buildings that aren't doing anything right. She literally starts licking her hands and then rubbing her feet because her feet were ashy. So she's literally like doing this in the middle of the road to get the ash out of her feet. And I'm like, where the hell am I? So eventually she turns around and looks at me to think I'm a customer. And I was like, nah, no. Trying to go that way. And then I drove past and she just she tried to give me that sexy look, but it's like sexy 730 on crack. I just licked the ash off my foot look. So it looked really horrible and disgusting. And I just go to myself, who the hell's my only thought was, how as a parent could I have driven to this school and drop my kid off and say, see you in 4 years, son? I'm like, no, I'm turning around. I'm turning around.
I've got no comment
here. That's
no comment. I am not taking the bait. And the fact that you tried to dare suggest that was your only thought, you had a few more thoughts.
Well, I had a few more. The first was, who's coming to get a hooker at like 7:30 in the morning? Second, you don't have enough money to buy lotion? Like, where are we in life where you're not only you're hooking in Houston and you don't have money for lotion? I don't know what the hell's going on. This is when to get the hell out of there. I just be honest. I did pull my 9 a lot closer. I'm not going to lie. I knew something was about to pop off. Got to the campus. And I started one of the first questions I started asking the coach was like, how do you make sure your kids stay safe around here? They're like, no one really comes on campus. I was like, wow, this place is wild.
So how much does a hooker with ashy feet cost?
Dude, I can't go. Let me tell you, you want a hooker, you can go to the Dominican, you can go to Costa Rica. You want to go that route, you can go there. You ain't got to go to Houston.
Eric Torres says 9-3, get a rope. Yeah. Okay. Again, expectations by the time that we get to July are going to be a little crazy. Michael says if Houston's going to set an attendance record when the Horns come in with icy whites, 11-1, double exclamation marks. I'm telling you, people are gassed up now. They literally, a couple of weeks ago, watched your team get played off the field by Washington, and they were like, 11-1, baby.
Wait. I just want to make sure I understood what he's saying correctly. Houston going to set an attendance record when the Horns come in with icy whites. Oh, I see what he's saying. Oh, 11-1 is what he's saying. Is
correct. He's got two separate statements.
Okay, yeah. It seemed like there was somewhat the comma thing kind of didn't throw me off.
And then Jesse says, we're beating Bama. Last year, everyone was bragging about how loaded they were, and we almost won. They're losing Bryce, Will, Dallas, and Gibb, and we play them early.
I love you guys. Never change. Guys are amazing. I'm telling you, Catch, in August, you're 9-3. You might as well just say like 6-6. Everyone will think you are the most negative person associated with the program. No one will hear 9-3. You might say 6-6. It won't make a difference.
I should have known. I should have known that the chat at that point was in rare form. Everybody had comments on the ash.
Man, that's a wild ass campus right there, man. Like that.
See, this isn't even nice, Scotty. It's not even nice. You know the watermelon story, right, Anwar?
Oh, your story. I didn't know where we were headed with that. That was really good for a second.
He was referencing my Elgin watermelon story where I don't really want to tell that story right this second.
I think you should tell it just for the brothers in the house that don't know what you're referring to. Like, I think you go ahead and might as well Help us.
All right. We'll end the show with the Elgin watermelon story. For those that don't know the story, Scotty B clearly does. My man, Scott, good to see you. I was working with Bobby Burton at the time, and me and Bobby Burton and Bobby Burton's wife and someone else were driving to College Station for the state 7-on-7 tournament. We stopped at a gas station in Elgin, and while we were in there, like, there was a cute little honey working behind the cash register, and I thought we had a little bit of chemistry or whatever, but I walk out, and when we get back into the car, everybody made note of what I thought also existed, that there had been a little bit of flirtation thing going on between me and the girl working behind the counter at this gas station. I'm like 18 years old, 19. No, I had to have been, this would have been, God. All right, so I'm probably 21 and or 22. I don't know. I'm up there. I'm in my 20s. We stop back on the way back, and she's not there. So on the way back, a couple days go by, and I'm like, you know what? I need to drive out there, see if I can find this girl. I go out there. She's not there. I go home, and she was pretty cute. Like, cute enough to make me want to drive out to Elgin. I decide I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to go out there, and I'm going to see if I can find this girl who I had met at this gas station. I go back up there for the final time, and she's not there. And I'm like, you know what? I came all the way out there. I need to at least ask the person working behind the counter who and where this chick is. But before I can do that, she walks in. So now we're like face to face, and she definitely recognizes me. But she's with somebody. She's with her sister. So her sister's like, oh. So anyway, we go outside. It turns out they're selling watermelons out of a truck in front of this gas station. Her sister, right? So I'm sitting there talking, and I'm like, you know, blah, blah. I don't even remember how it came out, but I started explaining. The sister had asked me some questions, and I was like, oh, you know, she told me that she went to Southwestern and that she played volleyball, and I kind of went through the full gamut. And she goes, that's not my sister. That's me. My sister is like 14. And at that exact moment, I feel that there's a police officer standing next to me at the watermelon stand, and he stops looking at watermelons, and he kind of looks at me, and I was like, I'll take 2 watermelons to go, please. It's the watermelon. I didn't tell that story. You know, if I really want to tell it, I'll lean into it. But yeah, kind of embarrassing. That's what Scott meant with the selling of the watermelons. And on that note, given that we've had now officially the Ashy Hooker and the watermelon story,
we're good.
And we've gone 30 minutes further than I thought we would with this. I'll tell everybody, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Tell your friends and family what they can watch when they tune in. For myself and Anwar Richardson and the guys over at DeadSoxy, go to that website, DeadSoxy.com, 25% off discount. Just use the promo code Orangebloods.